From now on, I want your paycheck sent to my account. My son Austin declared, sliding bank forms across my kitchen table. I was expecting gratitude from the boy I'd raised alone, but found a greedy stranger who saw me as his personal ATM. For 5 years, he'd lived rent-free while I worked overtime. Now he wanted total control of my money. So I smiled and agreed. But Austin had no idea what was coming. He thought this old forensic accountant was powerless. Dead wrong. What I did next destroyed his perfect world, and now he'll never forget the price of betraying your father. If you've dealt with ungrateful family members, you'll understand this story. Drop your city in the comments and let me know if you've been there too. Thursday afternoon in Denver has that crisp autumn feel that makes you want to linger over coffee. I was doing just that sitting at my kitchen table with the newspaper spread out and my favorite mug steaming beside me when Austin walked through my front door like he owned the place. He didn't knock, didn't call ahead, just used the spare key I'd given him years ago when he was still the son I thought I knew. "Hey, Dad!" He dropped his leather briefcase on my kitchen counter with the kind of casual authority that made my jaw tighten. Nicole trailed behind him, offering me one of those polite smiles that never quite reached her eyes. Austin pulled out a stack of papers from his briefcase and slid them across my table, right over the sports section I'd been reading. Bank authorization forms. Official-looking documents with lots of small print and signature lines highlighted in yellow. "We need to talk about your finances," he announced, settling into the chair across from me like we were conducting a business meeting. Nicole took the seat beside him, folding her hands in her lap like a perfect supporting actress. I set down my coffee mug and looked at the papers, then at my 32-year-old son. "My finances? Dad, you're 65 now. Managing money gets complicated at your age." Austin's voice carried that patient tone people use when they're explaining something to a child. "Technology isn't really your generation's strong suit, and with all these online banking systems, investment platforms..." He gestured vaguely as if my supposed incompetence was obvious to everyone in the room. "I handle investments professionally now," he continued, straightening his tie. "Made some really smart moves with my portfolio this year. This arrangement would eliminate all that financial stress from your life." Nicole nodded along like a bobblehead. "Austin really is excellent with money management, Atticus. It would be such a weight off your shoulders." I picked up the top form, scanning the legal language. "So you want my paychecks deposited directly into your account?" "Our joint account," Austin corrected, though I noticed his name was listed first on every document. "I'd handle all the bills, the budgeting, investment decisions. You wouldn't have to worry about any of it." "What about my personal spending money?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Austin's smile tightened just a fraction. "We'd set up an allowance system. You know, a reasonable amount for groceries, gas, that sort of thing. An allowance for a man who'd worked 43 years as a forensic accountant. And I'd still be able to see my bank statements." "Dad, why would you need to?" Nicole interjected. "Austin would handle all of that. You could finally relax and enjoy retirement." I noticed how Austin's fingers drummed against the table when I asked questions, how his jaw clenched when I didn't immediately grab a pen. This wasn't a conversation to him. It was a formality before getting what he'd already decided was his. "I suppose it does sound helpful," I said finally, watching their faces brighten with anticipation. "You know what, son? Let me think this over for a few days. I want to review these papers properly." Austin blinked. He'd clearly expected resistance arguments, maybe some emotional manipulation about family trust. Instead, he got reasonable consideration. "Oh, well, sure, Dad. Take your time." He gathered up the papers but left one copy on the table. "Just don't take too long. These financial markets move fast." They left shortly after Austin's confidence returning, as he probably convinced himself the hard part was over. Nicole gave me another one of those plastic smiles and reminded me to call if I had any questions. I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the authorization form they'd left behind. The coffee had gone cold, but I didn't bother reheating it. Instead, I studied Austin's confident handwriting on the signature lines, the way he'd already filled in account numbers and routing information. They'd rehearsed this. Every word, every gesture, every reasonable-sounding justification. My son and his wife had sat in their perfect house planning how to take control of my life's work, and they'd made it sound like charity. I wasn't as surprised by his request as I probably should have been. 18 months earlier, a bank statement caught my attention. One line item that didn't belong there. I was sitting in the same kitchen chair where Austin would later spread his authorization papers. But back then I was just a father reviewing his monthly Bank of America statement on a quiet spring morning. The Denver sun was streaming through my windows, and I had my reading glasses perched on my nose going through each transaction like I'd done for decades. That's when I saw it. An ATM withdrawal for $2,100 from a location I'd never been to. A 7-Eleven on Colfax Avenue clear across town from anywhere I'd have reason to visit. My first thought was simple bank error. These things happened. I'd seen plenty of accounting mistakes in my 43 years in the business. I drove down to the branch that afternoon, statement in hand, ready to sort out what I assumed was a clerical mishap. The young teller, a pleasant girl named Sarah, pulled up my account on her computer screen. "Let me check this transaction for you, Mr. Fairchild." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "This withdrawal was made using your debit card and PIN number at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th. 11:47 at night. I'm usually in bed by 10:30. "Are you sure about the PIN?" I asked, though my stomach was already starting to twist. "Yes, sir." The correct PIN was entered on the first try. I sat in my truck in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes after that, staring at the statement. Only 2 people knew my PIN number. Me and Austin, who'd helped me set up online banking the previous year when my arthritis made typing difficult. Only Austin had a spare key to my house. Only Austin knew my daily routines well enough to know when I'd be sound asleep. But this was my son, the boy I'd raised alone after his mother died, the young man I'd put through business school. There had to be another explanation, so I decided to watch quietly before jumping to conclusions. Over the next 6 months, I became a forensic accountant investigating my own life. I created spreadsheets, tracked patterns, cross-referenced dates with Austin's visits. What I found made my blood run cold. Small withdrawals, usually between $300 and $800, always within 48 hours of Austin stopping by the house. Always from ATM locations I'd never visited. Always late at night, when any reasonable person my age would be asleep. The amounts grew bolder as time went on. 300 became 500. 500 became 800. Each theft a little more brazen than the last. But the money wasn't the worst part. I discovered credit card applications submitted in my name. Utility accounts transferred to Austin's address without my knowledge. Insurance claims I'd never filed. And when I called the bank to ask about my account activity, the customer service representative mentioned something that nearly broke my heart. "Oh yes, Mr. Fairchild. Your son explained that you've been having some memory issues lately. He's been so helpful in managing your affairs." Memory issues. Austin had been laying groundwork, creating a narrative that painted me as a confused old man who couldn't manage his own finances. 18 months of systematic theft totaled $8,500. But that was just the beginning of my calculations. I sat down with my old accounting ledgers and calculated something that made me physically sick. For 5 years, Austin had lived in my house rent-free. No utilities, no groceries, no household expenses. I estimated the monthly cost at $2,100, $1,800 for rent in Denver's market, $200 for utilities, $300 for the food he and Nicole consumed during their frequent family dinners, $2,100 a month for 60 months, $126,000 in subsidized living. While Austin was saving every penny of his $4,200 monthly salary, I was working extra hours at the firm to cover expenses I didn't even realize I was shouldering alone. Austin had accumulated $189,000 in savings during those 5 years, money he used to buy his $195,000 house in cash. My generosity had been weaponized. My trust had been turned into a business plan. The night I finished those calculations, I sat in my study until dawn, staring at columns of numbers that told the story of my son's betrayal. Not just the theft, but the systematic exploitation of a father's love. I could have confronted him then, could have demanded explanations, apologies, restitution. But 43 years of investigating financial crimes had taught me something important. Always let the perpetrators show you the full scope of their operation. I needed to understand the complete extent of Austin's sense of entitlement. What I discovered next would change everything between us forever. 6 months of careful planning taught me that catching a thief requires thinking like one. After those late nights with my calculator and spreadsheets, I knew confrontation wasn't the answer. Emotional outbursts don't hold up in court. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. That's what brought me to the law offices of Turner & Associates on a gray Tuesday morning in October. Michael Turner's office sat on the 14th floor of a downtown Denver high-rise. Turner himself was a man in his 50s, with steel gray hair and 30 years of family law experience. Mr. Fairchild, he said after I'd laid out Austin's activities, what you're describing constitutes clear financial elder abuse. Multiple felonies. He leaned back in his leather chair. The theft, the unauthorized credit applications, the identity fraud, any one of these could result in serious criminal charges. What would you recommend? Build an airtight case. Let him commit a major crime that's impossible to deny. Right now, a clever defense attorney could argue that you gave him permission for some transactions. Turner pulled out a legal pad. We need clear documentation. Bank records, witness statements, recorded conversations. And most importantly, we need him to commit fraud when he knows he doesn't have permission. You want me to set a trap. His warning echoed as I drove home. Family cases are emotionally brutal, Mr. Fairchild. Are you prepared to potentially lose your son forever? I was. The next person I approached was Dorothy Campbell, my 70-year-old neighbor who'd lived next door for 15 years. I've been waiting for someone to call that boy out, she said when I explained the situation. We were sitting on her front porch watching autumn leaves fall. The way he talks to you, Atticus? The disrespect. Dorothy recalled specific incidents. Austin calling me clueless about money, within her earshot making jokes about old people and technology during neighborhood gatherings. Last month I heard him tell that wife of his that you were getting senile and someone needed to handle your affairs. Dorothy said, her voice tight with disapproval. I asked if she'd be willing to testify if things went to court. Honey, I'd testify against the devil himself if it meant setting things right. Back home, I began setting up what Turner called the infrastructure of justice. I installed a digital recording system, completely legal in Colorado, as long as one party consents. I contacted my banks asking them to flag unusual activity. I reached out to Detective Ray Morrison at Denver PD's Financial Crimes Unit. Morrison, a 20-year veteran, told me to call the moment Austin crossed clear legal lines. We see this more often than you'd think, Morrison said. Adult children who view their parents as retirement accounts. The key is catching them in an act that's unambiguously criminal. I organized every piece of evidence into chronological files. Bank statements, credit reports, forged signatures, printed emails. I created backups and stored them in my safe deposit box. The psychological preparation was hardest. I spent long evenings walking my neighborhood thinking about the son I'd raised and the stranger he'd become. I had to accept that our relationship might not survive what I was planning. Dorothy found me on one of those walks. You're doing what love requires? Atticus, she said simply. Sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries they don't want. Her words became my anchor. I rehearsed scenarios. How to present opportunities that would tempt Austin into bigger risks. How to document everything without arousing suspicion. How to stay calm when every instinct would scream at me to protect my child. By December, everything was in place. The legal framework, the witnesses, the documentation systems, the police contacts. I'd transformed my home into a carefully monitored environment where Austin's next criminal act would be captured with courtroom precision. Now I just needed Austin to make his next move. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Friday evening at Denver Steakhouse. Austin was buying dinner, first time in 2 years. The call had come that afternoon, Austin's voice unusually cheerful. Dad, how about dinner tonight? My treat. I got some great news at work. The steakhouse sat in downtown Denver's business district, all dark wood and leather booths. Austin had reserved a corner table and was practically glowing when Nicole and I arrived. Dad, you're looking at the new senior portfolio manager at Hartwell Investments. Austin announced before we'd even ordered drinks. 40% salary increase plus performance bonuses. Nicole beamed beside him. We're finally going to finish the kitchen renovation. Maybe even add that deck we've been talking about. I congratulated Austin appropriately, but mostly I listened and observed. He was more animated than I'd seen him in months, gesturing with his wine glass as he described his investment strategies, his client portfolio, his wealth-building plans. The key is diversification, Dad, he explained, cutting into his ribeye. You can't just let money sit in basic savings accounts anymore. Inflation eats away at everything. Nicole nodded along. Austin's been teaching me about compound interest and market timing. It's fascinating how much money we've been leaving on the table. They talked about their house, their cars, their vacation plans. Everything required money, and lots of it. That's when Nicole provided the opening I'd been waiting for. Speaking of money management, She said Austin's gotten so much better at handling our finances. Maybe you could give us some tips, Atticus. I set down my fork and smiled. Actually, speaking of finances, I got some unexpected news this week. Austin's attention sharpened immediately. What kind of news? Well, you remember my Aunt Margaret out in Grand Junction? Her estate finally got settled. Turns out she left me $75,000. Austin nearly choked on his wine. $75,000, Dad, that's incredible. It's sitting in my basic savings account right now. I continued watching their faces carefully. I have to admit, it makes me nervous. I've never had that much money just sitting around. The look that passed between Austin and Nicole was worth 6 months of planning. Pure, undisguised greed. Dad, you really can't leave that kind of money in basic savings, Austin said, his voice taking on that patient, condescending tone. You're losing hundreds every month to inflation. I know, but I don't understand all these investment options. It's overwhelming for someone my age. Austin leaned back, and I could practically see the wheels turning. You know what, Dad? I could help you with that. It's literally what I do for a living now. I could set up a proper investment portfolio, get you real returns. Would you? That would be such a relief. Of course, we could go to the bank tomorrow, get everything transferred into an account I can manage. I'll make sure your money is working as hard as possible. Nicole squeezed Austin's hand. You're so good at this stuff, honey. Your dad's lucky to have someone who really understands finance. I played the grateful, slightly overwhelmed father perfectly. By dessert, Austin had convinced himself he was doing me the favor of a lifetime. Saturday morning found us at Wells Fargo, where Rebecca Foster greeted us with professional courtesy. Austin strode in like he owned the place, briefcase in hand. We need to set up investment management for my father's inheritance, Austin announced. I'll be handling his portfolio going forward. Rebecca looked appropriately concerned. Mr. Fairchild, this is a significant amount. Are you certain about these transfers? Absolutely, I said, playing my part. Austin knows much more about these things than I do. Austin signed the authorization papers with a flourish, gaining official access as my financial advisor. Then, with Rebecca documenting everything and my recording device, capturing every word, Austin transferred $25,000 into his personal checking account. This is just the initial investment tranche, he explained to Rebecca, eyes bright with anticipation. I'll be moving it into a high-yield portfolio Monday. Much better returns than basic savings. Austin left the bank feeling like he'd won the lottery. $25,000 in his account with $50,000 more to follow. Nicole was already making calls about expediting their kitchen renovation. He'd just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. Sunday evening, time to show Austin who he'd really been stealing from. I'd spent the weekend arranging everything with the precision of a closing argument. Evidence folders organized chronologically on my coffee table. Recording equipment tested and ready. Dorothy Campbell on standby as a witness if needed. Detective Morrison's card in my shirt pocket. Austin arrived at 6:30, Nicole beside him, both expecting our usual Sunday dinner routine. Austin was still riding high from Friday's bank transaction, whistling as he walked through my front door. Hey, Dad, something smells good? What's cooking? He stopped short when he saw my living room. No dinner preparations, no warm lighting, just me sitting in my recliner with 24 months of evidence spread across the table between us. Nicole's smile faltered immediately. Atticus, is everything okay? I gestured to the chairs across from me. Austin, Nicole, please sit down. We need to discuss your unauthorized financial activities. Austin's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, then recognition, then the careful blankness of someone buying time to think. I'm not sure what you mean, Dad. I opened the first folder and pulled out his bank statements from the past 18 months. Every fraudulent transaction highlighted in yellow marker. March 15th, $2,100 withdrawn from the 7-Eleven on Colfax at 11:47 p.m. You were supposed to be home with Nicole that night, weren't you? Austin's throat worked, but no sound came out. April 3rd, $500 from the King Soopers on Federal. May 22nd, $800 from the Chase branch on Hampton. I read each entry with the methodical precision I'd once used in forensic accounting reports. 18 months of systematic theft, totaling $8,500. I pulled out the recording device and pressed play. Austin's voice filled the room, confident and condescending, as he explained to Rebecca Foster how he was managing his father's investments. That's your voice, isn't it? Austin authorizing the transfer of $25,000 into your personal account. Nicole stared at her husband like she'd never seen him before. Austin, what is this? But I wasn't finished. I spread out photographs of forged signatures, copies of credit applications submitted in my name utility bills, transferred to Austin's address without authorization. And then there's the matter of your 5-year residency in my home. Let's call it what it was. A $126,000 subsidy that allowed you to save every penny of your salary while I worked overtime to cover expenses I didn't even realize I was shouldering the loan. Austin's composure cracked completely. His hands shook as he reached for the documents, as if seeing them up close might make them disappear. Dad, you're confused. These numbers are wrong. I was helping you manage your finances, remember? You asked me to... I asked you to steal from me. My voice stayed level, but 43 years of controlled anger leaked through. I asked you to forge my signature. I asked you to tell bank employees that I was having memory problems. After everything I've sacrificed for this family... Austin's voice cracked as desperation took hold. Do you have any idea what I gave up to take care of you? The opportunities I passed up. You mean the opportunities you passed up while living rent-free in my house? While I paid for your food, your utilities, your car insurance? I leaned forward. Tell me, Austin, what exactly did you sacrifice? Nicole found her voice. I had no knowledge of any of this, Atticus. I swear if I'd known, you knew. I pulled out a printed email thread Dorothy had helped me retrieve from Austin's carelessly discarded laptop. Right here, Nicole. You and Austin discussing my declining mental state and how to handle the old man's money before he loses it all. The silence that followed was deafening. Austin tried one more deflection. Dad, this feels like entrapment. You set me up with that inheritance story. I didn't create a criminal, Austin. I just finally caught one. I gathered the evidence back into its folders. My movements deliberate and final. You have until tomorrow evening to return every penny you've stolen. All $33,500. If you don't, I'm pressing charges for elder financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud. Austin's face went white. Dad, please, I can't possibly... Then you should have thought about that before you decided your father was an ATM instead of a person. Nicole grabbed Austin's arm. We need to go, now. They left without another word, Nicole practically dragging Austin to their car. I watched from my window as they sat in my driveway for 10 minutes, Austin's head in his hands, while Nicole gestured frantically. I knew he couldn't return the money. $25,000 had already been spent on kitchen renovations and car payments. The remaining $8,500 would require liquidating assets he didn't have. What happened next would determine if I still had a son. Austin had 24 hours to prove he understood the gravity of his crimes. I didn't sleep that Sunday night. Instead, I sat in my study, listening to the house settle around me and wondering if I'd just lost my son forever. Dorothy had brought over a casserole and stayed until nearly midnight, her presence a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. You did the right thing, Atticus, she'd said before leaving. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. But knowing you're right doesn't make it hurt less. Monday morning brought the first of Austin's desperate phone calls. His voice was strained, barely controlled panic bleeding through his usual confidence. Dad, we need to talk. I can get you most of the money, but I need more time. The $25,000 is tied up in investments that take time to liquidate. Investments. Even now, he couldn't admit he'd spent it on kitchen countertops and a down payment for Nicole's new BMW. You have until 7 p.m. Austin, not a minute longer. The calls kept coming throughout the day, Austin's voice growing more desperate with each conversation. He'd maxed out every credit card been denied for personal loans, called in every favor with friends and distant relatives. Nicole's parents had hung up on him. His college roommate wouldn't return his calls. By afternoon, reality was setting in. Austin could only raise $8,200 in cash, everything he could scrape together from selling furniture, electronics, and Nicole's jewelry. At 4 p.m., Nicole called me directly, her voice shaking with fury and fear. Atticus, you have to stop this. Austin made mistakes, yes, but he's your son. Family doesn't destroy family over money. This isn't about money, Nicole. This is about 30 years of taking advantage of someone who loved him unconditionally. He was helping you. You're an old man who doesn't understand modern finance. I'm a forensic accountant with 43 years of experience catching people exactly like your husband. She hung up on me. At 6:30, Austin showed up at my door one last time. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled. Wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, eyes red with exhaustion and desperation. Nicole waited in the car engine running like they might need to make a quick escape. "Dad, please." Austin's voice cracked as he held out an envelope thick with cash and a handwritten promissory note. "This is $8,200 in cash, and I'll pay the rest with interest. 20% annually. I'll sign anything you want." I looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "Austin, do you understand what you did to me? I made mistakes. You stole from me. You lied to bank employees about my mental capacity. You forged my signature. You used my credit to finance your lifestyle." My voice stayed level, but each word carried the weight of 18 months of betrayal. "And when I trusted you with my inheritance, you stole $25,000 within 24 hours. Dad, I can make this right." "No, Austin, you can't." I stepped back from the door. "This isn't about the money anymore. It's about accountability." I pulled out my phone and dialed Detective Morrison's number. Austin's face went white as he heard me speak. "Detective Morrison, this is Atticus Fairchild. It's time." "Dad, you actually called them." Austin's voice was barely a whisper. "You're really going to have your own son arrested. You did this to yourself." 2 patrol cars pulled into my driveway within 10 minutes, Detective Morrison stepping out of the first one with the weary professionalism of someone who'd seen too many family destructions. "Austin Fairchild." Morrison's voice was calm, official. "You're under arrest for elder financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud." Nicole's screams from the car were audible even through the closed windows as Morrison read Austin his rights. My neighbors appeared in doorways and windows drawn by the flashing lights and drama unfolding in their quiet suburban street. Austin looked at me one last time as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "I'll never forgive you for this betrayal, Dad." Betrayal. Even now he saw himself as the victim. I watched the patrol car disappear down my street, taking my son away from me, possibly forever. Dorothy appeared at my elbow, her weathered hand squeezing my shoulder. "You did what love required, Atticus," she said softly. "Sometimes the hardest lesson to teach is the one someone needs most." But standing in my empty driveway, watching the taillights fade into the Denver night, I wondered if teaching that lesson had cost me everything that mattered. The hardest part wasn't watching him get arrested. It was wondering if I'd ever see my son again. 6 months later, Judge Martinez's courtroom would determine whether redemption was still possible. I sat in the front row of the Denver County Courthouse, watching my son stand before the bench in a borrowed Navy suit. Austin looked different. Thinner, older, with none of the arrogant confidence that had defined him for so long. The weight of consequences had changed him in ways I was still learning to recognize. "Mr. Fairchild." Judge Martinez addressed Austin with the stern compassion of someone who'd presided over too many family tragedies. "You've pleaded guilty to elder financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud. These are serious crimes that carry significant penalties." Austin's voice was steady when he replied, "Yes, Your Honor. I understand the charges and I accept full responsibility for my actions." The prosecutor read the details of Austin's crimes with clinical precision. 18 months of systematic theft, forged signatures, unauthorized credit applications, the exploitation of trust that should have been sacred between father and son. When it came time for victim impact statements, I stood and faced the courtroom. Austin met my eyes for the first time since his arrest, and I saw something there I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse. "Your Honor," I began, "my son betrayed my trust in ways I never thought possible. But I'm not here seeking vengeance. I'm here hoping for healing, for both of us." I talked about the Austin I'd raised, the boy who'd helped me plant tomatoes in our backyard garden, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd hugged me tight the night his mother passed away. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under years of entitlement and poor choices. What my son did was wrong, I concluded. But what I did in response was necessary. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequences they need to grow. Austin's statement to the court was brief but powerful. He didn't make excuses or blame circumstances. He simply acknowledged the pain he'd caused and expressed his commitment to making amends. "I stole from the man who sacrificed everything to raise me," Austin said, his voice breaking slightly. "I can't undo that betrayal, but I can spend the rest of my life proving I learned from it." Judge Martinez sentenced Austin to 18 months probation, full restitution of $33,500. and 200 hours of community service helping elderly residents with technology and financial literacy. Family crimes cut the deepest, the judge observed, but family forgiveness heals the strongest. Mr. Fairchild, I hope you both use this opportunity wisely. The rebuilding process was slow and painful. Austin took 2 jobs, morning shift at a warehouse, evenings at a call center, working 60 hours a week to pay restitution. Nicole had filed for divorce within a month of his arrest, unable to handle the public shame and financial uncertainty. Austin moved into a studio apartment across town, furnished with second-hand furniture, and powered by a determination I hadn't seen in him since childhood. Every 2 weeks he'd drop off a check for restitution, and gradually we began having coffee afterward. Those conversations were awkward at first, filled with careful apologies and tentative attempts at normal father-son interaction. But slowly, something real began emerging from the wreckage of our relationship. Austin's community service assignment proved transformative. Working with elderly residents at the Denver Community Center, teaching them online banking and digital security, he began understanding the vulnerability he'd exploited in his own father. Mrs. Henderson reminds me of you, Dad, Austin told me one afternoon over coffee. She trusts everyone completely. It would be so easy to take advantage of that trust. He paused, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. I finally understand how evil what I did really was. The therapy sessions helped too. Austin began unpacking years of entitlement, learning to recognize the thought patterns that had justified his crimes. He started expressing genuine gratitude for things he'd always taken for granted. Dorothy, who'd become something of a surrogate grandmother to Austin during his recovery, put it best. That boy finally learned the difference between being given everything and earning something. By the time Austin completed his community service, our relationship had evolved into something healthier than it had ever been. We talked honestly about money boundaries and expectations. Austin paid his own bills, managed his own life, and asked for help only when he truly needed it. You taught me that love requires courage, Dad, Austin said during one of our walks around the neighborhood where he'd grown up. It would have been easier to keep enabling me, but you chose to save me instead. I'd started speaking at community centers myself, sharing our story with other families struggling with financial abuse. The response was overwhelming. So many parents trapped between love and enabling, unsure how to help adult children who'd lost their way. Austin often joined me at these presentations, offering the perspective of someone who'd been on both sides of the equation. His honesty about his crimes and recovery gave hope to families facing similar situations. The greatest gift you can give someone is the consequences they need to grow. I tell these audiences, Austin nodding beside me. Boundaries don't destroy relationships. They make healthy relationships possible. Sometimes love means letting people face the choices they've made. It's not easy, and it's not painless, but it's the only path to real redemption. Looking back, I realize I made the same mistakes so many parents make. I confused love with enabling. Don't be like me thinking that saying yes to everything your children ask for is the same as loving them unconditionally. The hardest lesson I learned through this painful journey is that real love sometimes requires saying no. It requires setting boundaries that protect both you and the people you care about most. God gave us wisdom not just to be kind, but to be discerning about when kindness becomes harmful. Betrayal stories like mine happen in families across America every single day. Adult children who see their parents as financial resources rather than human beings deserving of respect. But here's what I want you to understand from my true story. The moment I stopped enabling Austin's behavior was the moment I actually started loving him properly. These betrayal stories aren't just about money. They're about the fundamental breakdown of respect and gratitude within families. My true story taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices, trusting that God will use even painful circumstances to bring about growth and redemption. The greatest gift I gave my son wasn't my money or my house or my unconditional forgiveness of his crimes. The greatest gift was teaching him that actions have consequences and that real love has boundaries. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support.